I want to thank everyone in our studio audience here at Red Lake Nation College, downtown Minneapolis, right across from US Bank Stadium. And I also want to thank all of you at home watching on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks for joining us tonight. We got a great program for you. Migazins Nindishinikas, Jangweshe Nindudem, Marabimog Nindunjiba. My Ojibwe name is Migazins, or Little Eagle. My English name is Dan King, and my family is from Redby and the Mink clan. I have the honor of introducing our first speaker for the night, and that would be, in our Ojibwe way, we like to start off things the right way with a prayer and an honor song. And to do that, we have a special guest here, our spiritual advisor for the Red Lake Nation College, and that is Floyd Buck Jourdain. Can you come up, Floyd?
Aho, bonjour, Nindinwe Magnaduk, Nijinishnabe Duk, Beijing Yanigabo, Nidishkaz, Squagmi Zagi Gani, Nindojiba. Dapnan Sema, Wabanong, Jaonong, Nigabino, Kiwadong, Ishpaming, Hakin. Minawa, Nimishomasnan, Duegan. Creator, we ask your blessings tonight as we pass along these teachings that have been passed down to us for generations and generations. And I want to thank our chief for bringing us all here together. And this is what chiefs do. They pass on these types of teachings and hopefully instill them in the next generations that are coming up. So I want to share a song tonight, and just in honor of everything that's happening here this evening, which it's a beautiful evening, and we welcome all of you.
Make sure my microphone's on. Miigwech to all of you again, and thank you, Buck, for that beautiful song and prayer. And I should note that Floyd Buck Jourdain is also our Director of Equity or Human Resources, Cultural Education, and Archives here at the Red Lake Nation College. Some quick tips for our audience at home and everybody here in our studio audience. And that is, we encourage you, and we would love for everybody to participate tonight and make some comments in the chat. We will have a Q&A later in the session where James Vukelich will answer your questions. So we ask you to all participate and to also like and follow us on all the social media, Red Lake Nation College. We will have, as far as a few items for the night, if you're having trouble on Facebook, switch over to YouTube, and we will have, as I mentioned, the Q&A session. We will have a hard end at about 7:20 or 7:30. We actually have a basketball game tonight, so it's on Facebook Live, so we got to finish up before 7:30. So all of you at home, just let you know, we will be finishing by about 7:20 to 7:30. James will talk for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have 15 or 20 minutes for Q&A, and then we'll be wrapping it up. James will be giving us a final thought at that point. But before I introduce the main speaker, I want to share some exciting news and updates about Red Lake Nation College and our beautiful new Minneapolis campus. So with that, I would like, Devin, could you flip to that next screen? We have a new campus here in downtown Minneapolis, and people said, well, what are you guys doing? Why do you have a new campus? Well, we're expanding our mission to serve higher education and job training right here in the Twin Cities for our 8,000 tribal members that we have, and also 50,000 natives in the Twin Cities, but no tribal college. So we're trying to change that and offer a lot of higher education access and opportunity. You can flip to the next step. And so we are fully accredited. So what does that mean? That means we have the same exact accreditation standards as great universities like Notre Dame, University of Minnesota, and all these other great schools. So we meet the same exact high standards. And that also means ease of transfer. So you can transfer our credits to all these schools. A couple other big benefits to coming to Red Lake Nation College. We provide what we call a tech backpack, and that includes a laptop, an iPhone with internet hotspot as part of your educational package of coming here. So that's included when you come to school here. And also, almost all of our students graduate with zero debt. In the US today, the average 4-year debt for a student after 4 years in the US is $33,000. Our students finish 2 years, zero debt. We don't offer any loans. For here, it's just grants. So when you come to our college. So those are huge benefits to come to our school. And you can go to Red Lake Nation College from anywhere now. So once you're a student here, you could be living in California, Michigan. We've had students from Germany participate in our events. So you can be a student here and live anywhere. You flip to the next. So our fast track timeline is we're going to be offering classes here. We're starting to right now online, but we're going to be having an open house in May, and then we're going to be opening for good in the fall of 2022 for classes. So we're in the process of opening right now. We're currently accepting applications. You flip to the next one there, Deb. Yep. We're currently accepting applications, and you can apply either online, rlnc.edu, or in person. And remember, the only place you can get a tribal college, that perspective from a native perspective, is right here at Red Lake Nation College. Most of higher education doesn't include our perspective. We're not in the history books, but when you come to our school, we give you the true history. So we encourage you all to apply and come to Red Lake Nation College. With that, I'd like someone to come up and tell you a little bit more. And that person is our executive director here at the Red Lake Nation College. And she is a distinguished alumni from Harvard University, a distinguished, prestigious Harvard fellow, who's also worked at the University of Washington and many other tribal colleges, and about 20 years of experience working in higher education. She's a published author, and we're very honored that she's our executive director. So if I could have come up, Nadine Bill.
Great. Thank you, Dan. I'd like to give a warm welcome to everybody who's out there in the audience and the audience here with us today. Welcome to our new location. We're so happy to be here. We're also happy to share a glimpse of what our campus or our site is going to be in the future. So with that, having the tribal college here, the experience in the Twin Cities is going to be so meaningful, and we can't wait to share all of the programs, opportunities, classes, community education with you. So with that, I'm going to share a quick video so you can see what the future is going to look like here at this site. I am honored to be a part of this new venture. I'm Nadine Bill. I'm Upper Skagit from Washington State. I'm also a descendant of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I want to introduce my amazing staff. Come on up, Alexis. Great. We have a fun, energetic, amazing team that is here based out of the Minneapolis campus, here to serve you, here to work with you, get enrolled, and do just talk about the college and the opportunities. So right here to my right, I have Micah Whitecloud. She is the social media director, but she also does recruitment and outreach. We have lots of different hats here at the college. Next, I have Devin Crow. He's a member of the Red Lake Nation. He is a recent graduate from the University of Minnesota with a background in marketing and a business degree. Next to him, we have Alexis Peterson. She is a member of the Red Cliff Nation, and she is our student success counselor, outreach, office manager extraordinaire. So please, if you're interested in come checking out the campus, visit with one of these folks, and we'll look forward to meeting you. Thanks again. I'm going to hand it back over to Dan.
Miigwech, Nadine, and isn't that a great team? That's the kind of folks that we have here at the Red Lake Nation College. Young, educated, strong people working in Indian country. And we want you to be part of that team too. So you at home watching, you could be a Red Lake Nation College student as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. So now I have the honor of introducing our special guest for the night. And he's somebody who is a descendant of the Turtle Mountain Nation, international speaker and author, and a creator, as we all know, of the Ojibwe Word of the Day, very popular on the internet. He just reached 40,000 followers. That's pretty amazing. We just hit our 7,000, so we're trying to catch up to you, James. What I think it's most fitting is that the topic tonight for his discussion is love. And I think it's fitting that he talks about that because in his daily life of how he lives and he works with people and talks to them, he practices that in real life. That's the way he is. So he's very compassionate, very humble, very giving, great to work with. So we love having James come here and talk to us. Whenever you leave his events, you end up feeling better than when you came. So it's very positive energy that we just love that he shares that with us. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome James Kaagegaabaw Vukelich.
Aho, Bonjour in Denoy Maganadok. Anin, Kage Gogue Indigenous. Mekanak can do them. Mekanak Wajawing and Dunjaba. Beshoga Kabakang and Danongom. And Gitchi me Gwach Wendum, Jayaya no Manongom. Pijigo me Gwach, gonna wabba me egg, Minowadash, Bizendawi egg. O Oma, Minowadash, Iwidi. Engishagana Gaye. So I'll speak some English as well. What I said there was a protocol greeting. Hello, all of my relatives. My name is Kage Gogue. I'm Turtle Clan. I'm a descendant of Turtle Mountain. I live close to Minneapolis today. In fact, I had lived here for well over 20 years, and it's really nice to come back to the old neighborhood. So I'd like to say, Pijigo Miigwech to Misquagame Zaagiidiwin Love, going to the Red Lake Nation College for inviting me to come and speak. And I wanted to thank you all in the very beginning for listening and for watching this particular presentation on Zaagi'idiwin, on love. Nitum, Niwi Miigwechwe Ag, Igua Gagagigidojig. I'd like to thank, it's Bejig Niganinini? Bejig Niganigabo. I'm a Kage Gogue. I should remember that in magazines for the kind introduction. Miigwech Nagamotawiyang. Thank you so much for singing to us. Engichi Miigwech Wendum. Miss Agogiget Minotagozian. You certainly sounded good. Great. And tonight's discussion, it's the natural progression of a talk I've been doing, which is my goal, to talk all over the world about the 7 generations and the 7 grandfather teachings. I've had a chance to speak about the 7 grandfather teachings in a number of places, locally, nationally, and internationally. And now, rather than speaking of all of them, I'd like to focus on Zaagi'idiwin. Our sacred grandfather teaching, one of our sacred laws, one of our 7 grandfather teachings, and a little context on that. As Anishinaabe, we have been given a good way of life. It's called Minobamatsuin. It is a life of peace and balance. It is a life without conflict with your relatives or your environment. It's a life without contradiction, saying one thing and doing another. It is a holistic life, a holy life. And our ancestors instructed us and had discovered and had been given these teachings that to do that, we would lead a life with Zaagi'idiwin, with compassionate, unconditional love for one another, with Deboywin, with truth, with Gwaikwadizwin, with virtue, with righteousness, with honesty, with Dabasendizuin, with humility, with Manajiitiwin, with respect for one another, with Zungideewin, with great strength of heart, with courage, with bravery, and ultimately with Nibwakawan, with wisdom and intelligence. And if we were to lead that life, it would be a life that would be positively beneficial for not just all of our relatives today, but for someone coming 7 generations from now. Something I like about this topic of Zaagi'idiwin, of this sacred law, and maybe a quick note on what that word means, sacred law. Gichi debako negewunan. In it, we have gichi, great. Dib is to speak, to relate, to measure, and akonege is with a wood-like article in the hand. It's a reference to the okij, to the sacred pipe stem. To let all of you know, this is something that has been meditated upon and mediated with our sacred pipe. Maybe one of our most important gifts that we were given. And implement Nikon, a ritualistic relative, to help us give thanks, to pray, to ask for help, to make relationships. And really, if we were to translate that, it would mean the great law, the sacred law. We also call these the 7 grandfather teachings. Zaagi'idiwin Love. So this is February. Name Benegizis, Way Benegizis, Gatakosegizis. In the northern area, it's Kizegizis, the kind moon. And we have here this, we had a particular holiday that happened recently, Valentine's Day. And I think that the translation of that is very good. This one actually came from Red Lake speakers, Mindemuyeyak, old ladies who are no longer with us. And this was in a textbook I found while I was teaching at University of Minnesota over 20 years ago. This was something that they used in the late 70s and in the early 80s. And they described Valentine's Day as the flirting day. And I think that's something very insightful about that. It's not necessarily love day, it's flirting day. And when we look at what that word means, nudaindam, he or she flirts, we have in it aindam, thought. It's working with the mechanics of the mind. And nud, and this can also sound like nuj. It's to seek, it's to hunt, it's to trap, it's to pursue. This is how they described, it's to snag, it's to, this is how they described flirting, was to, you've got someone in mind. You've got someone you're thinking about. And you're going after them. You could be Nuji Iwe, Nuji Inini, Nuji Ikwe. But there's something important here, and I read about some elders from the northern part of Lake Winnipeg who they would use this term for young love, for infatuation. So it's not love. This is something that's thought about. This is that way you can compulsively think about that person who has caught your fancy, the consequent feelings that come from that, maybe the butterflies, maybe you're having a hard time eating, but Deboywin would be infatuation. And that's not quite the same as saying love. And that's a very important distinction to make in the very beginning. What we're talking about here isn't something that comes from thought. It's not something that is linked to desire, to longing. It's something more vast than that. And so the word that they'll use for that is Zaagi'idiwin, love. I think a grandfather teaching we could use to investigate this word, this sacred love, would be Deboywin, truth. Deb is, to a certain extent, sufficiently in ways to speak. For some people, Deboywin can mean to speak from the core, from your heart. It has the day in it, heart, and way to speak. If we look at it, though, as Deboy, to speak to a certain extent, I have a feeling that the language is censoring itself, that the spirit of the language is censoring itself. It's saying, I can't define something eternal to you. I can only go to a certain extent. I can adequately describe it to you, but there's more there. I cannot define something eternal to you. So if we look at something like love, which is eternal, which has no beginning nor end, we get an idea that it's not a definition. It's a description. It's trying to define this. And in it we have this word part, Zaag, to emerge. And this shows up in a number of beautiful words. Zaagi'idiwin. This is a friend of mine's Indian name. Zaag, to emerge, and Aju is the mountain. Now, in one context, it could mean that he or she is ascending a mountain, ascending a hill, and they reach the summit and they come into view. But really what they're talking about here is Gimashomasanan, our grandfather, Jesus, the sun. And in the morning, when he comes from beyond the horizon, from the darkness, from beyond thought, from beyond vision, and he rises, he illuminates everyone and everything. What we're getting here is a description in action. We can't define it, but we can see, what does Kijanabek do? What does the Creator's unconditional love look like for Anishinabek? It has to be something like this. It has to be something for everyone and everything. Zaagiidiwin. I saw this the other day. My wife and I would joke that, well, this word actually means Zaag, again, to emerge, and Asige, to shine or to flash. My wife and I would see this image. We would joke to each other that this was like God, because as children we would see this on an inspirational poster, and there would be words of spiritual nature written on it. But this is light coming from behind the clouds, from behind sight, and then illuminating everything around it. Zaagi Bagages. And it's kind of nice to talk about this now in February. There's a lot of snow on the ground. It's still very cold. Yet in a few months, we'll have the month of May. We call this the Zaagi Bagages. In here we have Zaag, to emerge, and the bug is a leaf. And as it begins to warm up, as spring approaches, the sun is out longer, the days become warmer, the thunderbirds fly overhead, and there's a morning when you're walking along the boulevards of Minneapolis, and you notice that all of these once bare tree branches have life emerging from them. The medicines are growing underground. People who are tending their gardens, the mandamin, the corn, these are coming to life. And when they come to fruition, the mushkiki one, the strength of the earth, the medicine, the food, the mandamin, the trees, these will feed and heal everyone. A priest or a prostitute, a thief or a teacher. Again, we are seeing what unconditional love looks like. And it has to be something for everyone and everything. So we know at this point that when we're talking about love, this isn't something that we can think about. We can't say, I am going to love this person. It's not its origin. It doesn't come from thought. It has to be something that emerges from deep within us. And when it does emerge, it's for the benefit of all of our relatives, and whomever that may be. And I think if we were to talk about love, we absolutely must discuss this word as well. We don't have just one word for love, Zaagi, to emerge. I think that we would have to discuss Zaagi'idiwin for this to be a genuine and authentic conversation about love. Now, this word has a number of different meanings. It can mean to pity someone. It can mean to love unconditionally. And it can mean to bless. Again, we can't really define it, but I think this is when our ancestors would go to the stories to see an example of what does Zaagi'idiwin really look like? How do we act this way? How have we been treated with this unconditional blessing, with this love, with pity? And I think one of the most beautiful stories for this would be one of the names for this month, Name Benigizis, the suckerfish moon. And this is one of the stories where I had studied linguistics, I had studied languages, and I understood the word and how you conjugate it, but I didn't understand what it meant. I had heard it used in the Madodos one, in the sweat lodge. I had heard it used while people were Zaagi'idiwin, while they were in the pipe ceremony, but I didn't quite get it. And this was the story that really explained it to me. And it's very fitting that we tell it during this month, the month of February. So it had been a cold month, like it has been this year. There had been a number of, we would call them a polar vortex, incredibly cold weather in a pre-contact Mikanako menacing, on a pre-contact Turtle Island. And during some of these cold months, particularly in midwinter, if it is incredibly cold, like 40, 50 below with the wind chill, the animals will sit still for a month. They will burrow in and they will get through the cold winter. And after that, they'll begin moving around. They'll begin looking for food. But if you are a hunting and gathering people, and the animals you are hunting are hiding from you, this can be very dangerous. And in fact, starvation was beginning to set in on the Anishinaabe Nation. By February, the manoman, the wild rice, the mandamin, the corn, the food sources, the batewias, the dried meat, it was becoming incredibly low. Hunger was setting in. I like the name for that, buckade. That buck can mean lean, but it can also mean you're getting lean from hunger. Starvation was beginning to set in. And by the 6th and 7th and 8th day that people were going with very little or no food, things were becoming desperate. And it must have been something terrible to listen to the crying of children and not being able to do anything about it, as hunger, fatigue, weakness was setting in. And so they did what they were instructed to do. They used their tobacco, they used prayer, and they asked for help. And there was a fellow, a man, who received a dream. And in his dream, Nameben, the suckerfish, a bottom dweller, approached him and said, if you set your net underneath the ice, we will swim into them. We will alleviate your hunger. You will survive. And so the next day, that's exactly what they did. They followed the instructions that they had received. And in that, most fish during these very cold months will swim towards the bottom of a lake, of a river. Namebin goes towards the ice. He swam into the nets, and our hunger was alleviated. Our lives were saved. From that point on, February had been known as Namebinigisis. To commemorate that. Now, in there, we actually see a perfect example when I think of Shawenam. This fish, for some people, a lowly bottom dweller, looked at starving human beings who were going to die, took pity on them, showed unconditional love by swimming into their nets, and in that gave them a blessing. They had given us their lives so that we could survive. They asked for nothing in return. In fact, they did it out of kindness, out of love, out of unconditional love. You know, there is another story too on what we call the month of February. It is Namebinigisis, Gatakkozagizis, the short moon. It's also Webinigegizis, the throwing away moon. And it said that Anishinaabe would take a small stick about yay big and tie a tobacco tie to the end of the stick. They would go out, look at the moon, and say, Newebanon Dakkoziwin, I'm throwing away my illness in Gokkomisanon. Our grandmother, the moon, would take all of our illness from us and would heal us. Again, showing us unconditional love, showing us pity, knowing that if you're a human being, you are going to go through loss, sadness, anger, frustration. And she's willing to take that from any and all of us. We're seeing here is someone who has pitied us, someone who has shown us unconditional love, and someone who has blessed us with healing. And there's one last story I would love to share with this. It's the boy and the makwa. A boy and the bear. And I read this story in the William Jones Ojibwe text. It was recorded in Ojibwe. It was very touching. It's very beautiful. Because there's a boy, a young child, a Zains, that would be our Ojibwe name for boy, who is being beaten at home. He's being physically abused. He's probably not getting very much food or affection. His parents have a whole bunch of children already, and they're not looking after him. And so one day he goes wandering off into the woods, where he runs into a bear. And this must have been very startling for him, but we can tell this is something sacred is going on. Deboywin Dan. It's thought of in a mysterious, spiritual, sacred way. Because instead of becoming afraid, he forgets about his life. And this bear, Makwa, takes him and brings him out into the woods. He shows him how to fish. He looks after him. He takes very good care of him. He keeps him warm during the winter. He looks after him for over 4 winters. There'll be 4 seasons where he shows him where to get the best berries, where to find medicines to heal himself, where to go in the river to get fish, how to make clothing. It's a Manadu Makwa. It's a spirit bear. And after 4 winters, He looks at this child and says, it's time for you to go home. And he brings him to the village, and he said, if you ever need help, just call for me. And at this point, he presents him with this small little bugamagan, a ball-headed war club. Just ask for me, just cry for me, and I will come and help you. And so this child returns home. And it's very scary and unsettling for everyone in the village because he had disappeared 4 years ago. Everyone had assumed he was dead. And yet he arrives back in the village dressed almost like an Atsokan, like an ancestor in the old-fashioned way. He's well-fed. He's been well cared for. He's obviously been shown love, affection. His basic core human needs have been met. Food, water, clothing, shelter. And his parents are both intimidated, a little scared, and also incredibly happy to see their little boy again, who has grown up. You can imagine leaving as a little child and coming back 4 years later, he was almost unrecognizable. So he was treated with great respect, with great care, and with great affection. And as can happen in ancient societies, there was a period when hunger came back. And they didn't know what they were going to do. And this young, mysterious child who had great confidence said, don't worry, don't worry. And he asked for help. And all of a sudden, across the river, a bear came swimming into the river. The boy got into a canoe, met him partially across the way, and lightly tapped him with the bugamagan that he had been given, and the bear died. And he was able to feed his relatives. And maybe one of the greatest things you could do, be able to feed, care for your relatives at the time. And their hunger was alleviated. And for the rest of his life, it was noted that he was able to do that in times of dire need, he was able to get help. He had a great protector. And in that, we see how we should treat our relatives. Note that there's no exchange going on here. He is not paying the bear. There is no trade or transfer. He is receiving help without expecting any. The bear is giving help without expecting anything in return. He's showing compassionate, unconditional love. Sometimes we can forget to do that and expect something in exchange for help rather than altruistically. Better yet, with Zaagi'idiwin, with pity and with compassion and with kindness for our relatives. So I think often I would like to do a talk like this and tell everyone in the audience and anyone who is watching at home how to say, I love you. I think that would be incredibly important. Now that we're learning about what these words actually mean, it's not necessarily, it's something with compassion. It's something that's unconditional. It's also something undescribable, something that escapes definition. So Zaagi'idiwin. Zaagi'idiwin would be I love you. And there's also Kijanabek. Kijanabek. I love you. I have that pity for you. I have compassion for you. And in that, you'll receive a blessing. When I drop my son off in the morning, I always loudly yell, not yell, but Kijanabek, Kijanabek. We don't have a word for goodbye in Ojibwe. It'll have to be, I'll see you again. And he's since learned that. And already in first grade is like, Dad, do you have to say that so loud? Or Dad, do we have to say, you love me in Ojibwe? And I'm like, yes, I absolutely do, because I do. Kijanabek. How important that is to say to the people that we see on a daily basis. And when I would hear this in prayer, with people using tobacco, with people in the Madodos one, in the sweat lodge, this is what I would hear. Shawena Mishanam. Shawena Mishanam. Shawena Mishanam. Shawena Mishanam. 4 times. And really what this means, how this is translated is, please bless, pity, and love all of us. All of us. You're asking something mysterious. Again, the Manadu, the spirit, the Manadug who may be listening. And it's not Joanam Ishin, love me, it's Joanam Ishinam, all of us. Because we know that we're all related. We're inextricably interconnected. And if we are our relatives and our relatives are us, if we truly are asking for pity, if we're truly asking for love, if we're truly asking for a blessing, then we're asking for everyone. If you who are listening tonight receive a blessing, it is good for me. It's the same as if I am blessed, it is good for all of our relatives. So you would rarely hear people pray for themselves. They would pray for all of their relatives, and this is a way to do that. This is a simple one-word prayer to ask for help. Also, we should definitely speak about this word, Gije Watsi. He or she is kind, he or she is generous. And when we nominalize that, we put the win at the end, it becomes kindness, loving kindness, and unconditional love. Gije Watsuan. Now, something important about this word, it has atasi in it. It means to live. We can live with kindness. And it's a way that you can live. As a human being. We also use this term for the spirit. Kije Manadu, the kind spirit, the benevolent mystery. That word Manadu can mean mystery. It can also mean spirit. So Kije Manadu is the old word, I think, for God. Gichi Kije Manadu, the kindest spirit, the benevolent mystery. The one who, like the sun, shining on all of us, showing all of us unconditional love, acts that way. But as human beings, we can also have that love is not reserved exclusively for the Creator. Human beings can live this way as well. And the people who would do that would be the Kijanabek. This was a word that powerfully affected me when I was a young man. I heard it in my second year of Ojibwe. And the story I had heard was, there were young men around 20 winters. We counted about 20 winters, who would, at a point in their life, make a promise, a vow, that for the next 20 years of their life, whatever they had in excess, whatever they had in surplus, this could be their manomen, their wild rice, their maple sugar, whatever they had hunted, whatever they had trapped, whatever they had farmed and gathered, they would give away. We have a different point of view with Indigenous economics. Their wealth wasn't decided by what they had hoarded, by what they had accumulated. Their wealth was decided on what they had given away to those who were desperately in need. And there are always people in our communities who are in need. There's always the widow. There's always the orphan. There are always the elderly who may not be able to go out and hunt and trap the way that they had as young people. And the Kijanabek for 20 years, during the height of his power to hunt, to trap, to gather, would give away what he did not need. Often they would look poor and almost impoverished. And when the missionaries would note that, they said, the people who are most highly respected in their communities almost look like paupers. They look impoverished. And it was because they had given everything to the people. And after 20 years of practicing that, here is someone who can no longer be bought or sold. Here's someone who has gotten over that ego to have more than someone else, to be looking out for number one, someone who had acted in the best interests of the community. And people at that point in their lives may be considered then for leadership roles. Here is someone who is going to look after all of our relatives. And another person who would do that is the Ogichida, the Ogichidakwe, the warriors. People who, out of the love of their nation, would be unafraid to go and defend their nation's interests, maybe at the price of their own deaths. And who nowadays look after the Deboywin, look after the drums, look after the ceremonies, who are absolutely unafraid to go and pray for all of their relatives so that their relatives can lead a good life. So we can see love showing up in a number of different ways in how it affects our everyday life. For me as Kijanabek, I thought that is such a huge undertaking. And it struck me that anytime I could, if I could give away the language that I paid dearly for, it's quite expensive. If I could give that away, that would be maybe the greatest thing I could do. And it has brought so much joy and pleasure to me to be able to talk about these teachings as well as to share them. So if we look at this particular grandfather teaching through the lens of our sacred law of our 7 grandfather teachings, when we get into Deboywin and you see it about love, maybe one should ask, well, how should I act towards the people I love? I should tell them the truth. I should speak the truth to them. And ask yourself, well, people who love me and people who I love, do I lie to them? Do I deceive them? And then if we look at it from a broader perspective, it's, well, I am not going to use my words and my thoughts to define love. Because we can do that. We can do that very easily. This is going to have to be something that emerges then from me, that I do not seek to define. And if we think about humility, Deboywin, in love, for me, this teaching is very profound. When you break down the word, what does it mean? It has dabas lo, aim to think, and dizo of oneself. I think lowly of myself. Think about the people you truly love. Is it a top priority for you to be more important than them? Is it a priority for you to be more accomplished, more successful? Or is this someone who you wish to join along the path of life? That you are not seeking to dominate, to have power over, but someone you treat as a relative. You know, when I thought of this teaching this afternoon, when I was in Kaagegaabaw, Jamaica, there was an old friend of mine who shared the teaching that the Creator looks at us the way that grandparents look at grandbabies. And if we do have any parents or grandparents in the audience or who are watching and listening, to hold that baby and ask yourself, is it a top priority for me to be more important than this being? You really have that humility. It's, I wish to see you succeed. I wish for you to have all of your wishes fulfilled. And Zaagi'idiwin, respect. Really to go easy on is what that manaji means. I go easy on those who I love. I don't overburden them. I don't overstress them. When it is possible, I in fact try to lighten their load. And this is reciprocal. When we look at our relationships and we're showing respect to each other, are we helping our companions on the path of life? Are we helping them along, are we acknowledging the sacredness of their lives? And when you truly love someone, that's very easy to do. It's very easy to go easy on them. It's very easy to acknowledge that they too are sacred beings. And Zaagi'idiwin. You know, our word for courage, it literally means zung, strength, and the de'e is the heart. Here she has strength of heart. Here she is brave. And when I think of the Kijanabek, when I think of the Ojibwe, those who fearlessly defended us, be it in war, who advocated for us in ceremony, they did that with great strength of heart. Often you'll see them do it thoughtlessly, selflessly. It's an amazing sight to behold. And if you have that kind of love in you, it will change the very center, the very core of your being. And there's another note we should talk about too with Zaagi'idiwin and love. There will be times when you get disappointed in love. There will be times when the relatives who you hold dear will let you down. They will not live up to your expectations. They'll create loneliness. They'll create, in some cases, emptiness, and it takes great strength of heart to go and love again. To not be defined by that one relationship, but to love again despite some of those relationships. And that takes great strength of heart. It takes great bravery to do that. There's Zaagi'idiwin. Virtue, righteousness, honesty. Of course, we should be honest towards our relatives. And in here, we see that adizi again. That's to live. In Ojibwe, Guayak is right, straight, properly, correct, in alignment. Are our words in alignment with our actions? And if you want to know the truth about someone, observe how they lead their lives. And the truth invariably comes out. If I am honest, I want you to observe my life and see if my words and my actions are in alignment with each other. Because we can see, and everyone will have this experience where you have someone who professes to be traditional, to be religious or spiritual. And if you look at spiritual traditions all over the world, this is maybe one of the most important values. In Eastern Asian religions, in Middle Eastern religions, and indigenous religions all over the world. And you will hear them profess that they have this great love, and yet you'll hear them slander. You'll hear them backstab. You'll see them be mean. And ask yourself, does someone who truly has this benevolent, unconditional love for their people treat them that way? They speak behind their backs. Do they sabotage parts of their lives? You may have had that experience. The most important thing you can do is make sure that your words and your actions are in alignment. And if you do that, every one of your choices, every one of your decisions will be naturally intelligent if you act out of true love. Every single thing you do will be positively beneficial for not just all of your relatives now, but for someone coming 7 generations from now. You can still love them unconditionally, although you have not met them yet. You won't. You'll never meet them. You'll never see, listen, speak to, or hold them. Our great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren. Yet we can act, if we act with love towards them, with them in mind, then we can create a better path for them to walk. And we can do that by loving one another. Zaagi'idiwin. They love one another. It's reciprocal. Zaagi'idik would be they love one another. And so here, is something I think really important to discuss, because we have, how do we implement this in our everyday lives? And it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to think about loving someone you've never met, seen, spoken to in another continent, in another part of the world, and treating them that way. But here we see who we should love. And here's an important point that I love making, and I've only begun doing it in the past year. If you are all of your relatives, and all of your relatives are you, and it's your sacred duty to love them, should you also love yourself? And you should. You should show yourself the same compassion, the same benevolence, the same sort of unconditional love that you would show for all of your relatives, that you ask for when you're in ceremony. And we even have a word for that, Zaagi'idiwin. He or she loves themselves. But if we love, can we show love to the people that we may not know, but also, importantly, to the people we see every day, to the people in our lodge? That could be our parents, that could be our spouses, that could be our children. How important it is to treat them with this. We can act locally and have an effect that changes the world. In that family, that clan, by showing them that sort of love, we should ask ourselves, does that change our community then? Does it change our reservation? Does it change our city? And as we're doing that, then that will change our nation. Now, we can't make anyone love us. Yet, if we show love to all of our relatives, and when I say all of our relatives, that would be the Oasiag, the animals, the four-legged, the Beneshiag, the birds, the Giguyag, the fish, the Kijanabek, the human beings, the Aki, the earth, the Mushkikiwan, the medicines, the Nabi, the water, the Mitigug, the trees. We can't make them love us, but if we love them, then we can truly transform the world. And if we do that, we'll have Minobomatsuin, a life of peace, a life of balance, a life without conflict or contradiction. The natural consequence of that is to have good health. With just a moment left before we move into questions, I'd like to take this opportunity to say, Miigwech Bizindawiye. Thank you all so much for listening, and meet you. Miigwech.
Great job. All right. Miigwech to James again. Let's give him another round of applause. And I know you folks at home watching on Facebook and YouTube, I know you loved it as much as we did. And it's very powerful listening to James's words and, talking about love and how it's a foundational value. That really struck a chord with me, and how it's like the basis of all the 7 values, and how that lays the foundation. And it made me proud to think of our Red Lake Nation College team and how we use that here. And we actually have a policy that's called UPR, Unconditional Positive Regard, where we strive to treat every student just like that student is your own child. And that's how you show that unconditional love to your own child. And so we strive to treat every student that same way. And that's actually one of our official policies, based on love as a main value, because a lot of our students, they're first generation students, and so they don't have somebody at home who can help them and mentor them and coach them. So that falls on our staff and our faculty. So we strive to do that if you come to Red Lake Nation College. So I'm very proud of that fact, and that we really push and teach the values, the Ojibwe values that James was talking about tonight. And about 70% of our staff and faculty, I'm very proud that we're Red Lake members or other natives. So I'm very proud of our team. And this whole talk tonight that James provided us really makes that hit home, that, this is a very important thing to talk about. And so I'm really glad that James came here tonight and gave us a lot of great insight. So that's very, very deep. I always get a good feeling listening to James's talk. So, well, with that, we're going on to the Q&A session. And so I know Micah is back there queuing up some questions for me. And then we'll let James come back up in a minute. But if you want to flip to that screen where we have our surveys and our QR code. So we would love for you to give us some feedback. Tell us what you liked about tonight's presentation. If there's some things we can improve, just tell us how we did. Scan that into your phone and it'll lead you to a survey. It'll just take about a minute to do that survey. So if you could do that, and then we invite you to follow us and like us on social media. And so if you guys want to do that while you got a minute here, and we'll pull these questions up. And I'm going to go back and read those. So if James is going to come up, answer the questions. And then also he will be finishing up with a final thought once we finish the last question. So I'll head back to Micah and we'll go over those questions. So James, if you want to come back up. All right. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the first question that we have is, do clans influence marriage? And if so, how?
They do. We're speaking about love, marriage, Zaagi'idiwin. That is a natural progression of that. So the Dudem, that's the Ojibwe word for clan. It's actually the origin for the totem. Maybe you've heard of totem poles. Kind of hilarious note, the people who use totem poles have no idea what a totem is, a Dudem is. They speak a different language than us altogether. It's a totally different language family. But the Dudem would be similar to, but not the same as a last name. In fact, so if I were to go to another community, and when I did the protocol introduction, my name, my clan, Mikanak and Dudem, as you can see here, whoever was in the Mikanak clan would accept me as a relative. And it would be forbidden for clans to intermarry. It was looked down upon. It would be a onjiadem. It was condemned, and it was forbidden that there would be no inbreeding, or there would be no relationships like that. So clans didn't marry, and you would have to marry someone from another clan all the time. So it definitely influenced marriage. It definitely did.
Okay, thanks, James. The next question was, this will be an easy one. Actually, I think I can answer this one. Max from YouTube asked, when is James' next event? So we're actually kind of trying to plan them for every other month, and that's kind of what we've done. And actually, we'd love to have James here as a regular faculty member. So we're trying to work that out.
We are.
We would love to have that. So so that's kind of our answer there, Max.
You have a beautiful new campus too. So
Yeah,
it is really nice here.
Yep. So hopefully, if you'd like to see James as one of our regular faculty, go ahead and mention that on Facebook or YouTube or social media. All right. The next question was Erica from Facebook, and she asked, was there a ceremony for marriage in Native American culture prior to the present day? And then what about present day in a traditional setting?
There certainly was. So marriage would be acknowledged with the medicines, particularly with the opwagan, with the sacred pipe. And that would be, maybe not everyone knows this, but using the 4 sacred medicines, the asema, the tobacco, the gijik, the cedar, the wingush, the sweetgrass, and the washkade jibik or mushkade wash, depending on your dialect, the sage. And that this would be a vow that you would take in front of Kijanabek, in front of the kind spirit, the benevolent mystery, in front of God, that you would walk along the path of life with this person in a good way. Try to incorporate these values in your everyday life with your partner. And so it was something that was held in the highest of regard.
Okay, miigwech. Yuan from YouTube asks, was it more common for couples to marry within the tribe, or did they seek marriage from other tribes?
Often, it would be in the tribe. There's something interesting here that takes place with, for example, like with the Dakota Ojibwe Word, there would be times where there would be intermarriage between the tribes. You would have one spouse from one nation marrying the other. And something incredibly important about that was during times of warfare, if you are intermarried into the other tribe, are you willing to go and fight them to a point that would actually bring death, that would bring poverty? Would you do anything that would brutalize them? And so no. And again, this would be people who you would not be related to. So this is great for the gene pool, as well as making relationships with other nations. And so that would be incredibly important. And then marrying people from outside of the community as well. As we know from the reservation period, it only takes about 3 generations until you're related to everyone on the reservation. So different communities would, you would go and visit and hopefully find a beautiful partner to walk along with you on the path of life.
All right, miigwech, James. The next question was Megan from Facebook, and she asked, in regard to love, were Native American men monogamous pre-colonization, or did they have multiple wives? And what about Ojibwe men?
Yeah, polygamy. It would happen. Often, polygamy takes place when there's high male mortality rate. So it is a double-edged sword. Like, you may have maybe more than one wife, or if you live. But there would be definitely polygamous relationships. There's also, if you're looking at marriage, if a spouse dies, then you would most likely remarry again. When you look at the traditional society, you would need someone who is looking after the lodge, who is looking after children and looking after the community, and then as well as someone who is able to go and hunt and bring back food and bring back leather for clothing. So that's very important. Indeed, there are a number of documented cases, pre-contact to at least into the 1800s, where there are Ojibwe men who may have more than one wife. Again, this could sometimes be looking after another woman, because you were able to hunt, you were able to trap, you were able to fish. And a unique one was sometimes it's sororal marriage. So sometimes in the close-knit family structure of Ojibwe society, sisters probably spent every day of their lives with one another. In some cases, maybe you might have a marriage where a man marries 2 sisters so that they could maintain that relationship. Also in Ojibwe society, we're speaking about love. Those sisters would consider each other's children their own. That family relationship was very tight, it was very close-knit, And we would consider them nieces, but from an Ojibwe perspective, your father's brother's children would be your brothers and sisters. They would look at the children as sons and daughters, and your mother's sister's children would be brothers and sisters, and they would also look at their children as being sons and daughters too. So it's a very close-knit society. And we can see that, when I was talking about loving oneself, but then loving that community, if you can show that kind of love to even a larger family unit like that, you have a great opportunity to positively affect not just your dudem, not just your clan, but your community as well, and then ultimately the nation.
Miigwech, James. Yeah, we're here in beautiful downtown Minneapolis at our new Red Lake Nation College campus, and we got about 25 people at our setting here. So before we go to our last question, are there any questions from people in the room here that wanted to ask James anything? We'll give our people in the room a chance if they had anything pressing that they wanted to ask James. Otherwise, I got one more. While you're thinking about that, I got one question here from online. It was Hawk from Facebook asks, how young or old could Native American women marry in the past?
Well, definitely after they had become women. You never really see child marriages taking place. So they would be women, but there's also a name in the language for our young people. There is 4 sacred parts of life. You're the Abenugianes, you're the infant, you're the Abenugi, you're the child. You'll become an Inini or Ikwe, an adult, a man or a woman, and then if you've received the great gift of long life, you may become a Gichiaya, an elder, a great being, a Mindemuye, someone who holds the community together, an old lady, or an Akiwenzi, the one who comes from the earth, the old man. But in between there, we have this word called Oshkinigikwe, or Oshkinawe. And in Oshkinigikwe is a woman. It literally means new woman. So she may physically be able to give birth, to begin a family, but may not be ready to assume the awesome responsibility that comes with looking after a lodge, with healing and feeding and clothing a family. And the same with young men too, Oshkinawe. These may be young men who may want to spend more time hunting and fishing and trapping and traveling rather than, again, the most important enterprise in their life. Maybe the greatest source of love that they'll have is raising a family and creating an Anishinaabe, young, small Ojibwe to replace them in the nation. So you would definitely have to be at least in Oshkinigikwe. But even, so yeah.
Okay, thanks, James.
Miigwech.
Our
for the great questions.
Our last question, we have Brian from Facebook. We got time for one more question before we wrap it up. And then after this question, James will leave us with a final thought. But Brian from Facebook asks, it's kind of a long question and comment, but he's saying, it's very interesting. Can loving things too much throw you out of balance? Like the example in Toni Morrison's Beloved, where too much love may turn into depression and resentment. For example, if you love a tree too much and if someone shoots it down, perhaps no other tree will ever arouse the same pleasure as the morning star you lost, that you'll never grasp again, so you should go chasing waterfalls. Or stick to the rivers and lakes that you're used to. So there you go, James.
That's wonderful. And it's insightful though too. It's absolutely insightful because what we're seeing here is if you've loved and lost and it breaks your heart, were you holding on to it? Was that something you were keeping for you? And if that was your relationship to it, did you have this love that we were speaking about tonight? And saying that, well, because I've loved this one thing and it is no longer there. It's no longer mine. Can I possibly love again? And indeed, if you take the approach that our ancestors left for us, that it's something that emerges out of us, and it can be for anyone, not just one thing or one person, but for all of our relatives, then rather than facing heartbreak, I think you'll be gifted with great life, with great joy, with everything beautiful that a loving relationship brings with it. So, and for me, that's part of, not holding on, not seeking to be possessive, but to be able to let go and yet still maintain a loving relationship with your relatives. So.
Okay, thanks, James. And so now, as we leave, James will just kind of leave us with one final thought that wraps up tonight's presentation. So turn it over to James.
Miigwech, magazines, and again, miigwech. Misquagamiwi Zaagi'idiwin Kaagegaabaw. Thank you so much, Red Lake Nation College, for the invitation to speak tonight. It's a great pleasure. It's a great joy for me. I hope and pray that we are ending the pandemic phase of the last 2 years. That what was once pandemic is becoming endemic. And when I spoke of something unconditional, maybe the underlying meaning was this: every single human being you are going to meet, most likely, who went through the same 2 years that we all did here, has gone through loss, has had their lives radically changed, be it occupation, be it where they live, has most likely felt great sadness, loss, anger, anxiety, fear. Every single human being in our communities. And in our communities here, we have lost so many of our beautiful elders, those great beings, to the pandemic, that everyone you meet will have that sense of loss. And when we ask ourselves, how do we move forward? What will be our guiding principles forward? It should be to seek out a good life. It should be to treat all of our relatives with truth, honesty, virtue, and righteousness, with humility, with respect for one another's lives, the strength of heart to do that, the intelligence to make those right choices and decisions. But for all of your relatives that you meet, you may not know the loss that they have gone through in this period. So treat them with compassion. I know we use that term pity, but maybe compassion is better. Show whoever it is, even if you don't know them, that sort of unconditional compassion, that love for them. That may be the blessing that we all need in order to move forward in a good way, in order for all of us to seek out Minapumatsuin, that good life, that life of peace and balance, that life without conflict with one another, that life without contradiction, saying one thing and then doing another, so that we all may lead a holy life, a holistic life. Mi'ie, miigwech.
All right.